Welcome to Leaders Among Us with Shawn Stroud.
So excited for our guest today. We are welcoming Chief Dave Hober, and Chief is the 22nd Chief of the Monterey Police Department, and Chief has been in that role since July 15th of 2015. And as I was researching, getting prepared for our time today, Chief, I found this beautiful picture of you and this wonderful French bulldog. So tell us, who is that little guy there?
So that is Callahan. I've had him for about 2 years. Got him on July 4th, 2 years ago.
Okay.
Delivered to us. And so he comes, he's certainly not what we would call a canine in the police sense. He's a mascot. He's at the police department every day, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. He loves people, but for some reason he kind of has issues with long hair and glasses.
Oh, really?
Or beards.
Okay.
And so he barks at kids. He barks at kids too. So he hangs out with our person who runs our jails and records section, Alma Murphy. And he loves her more than anybody in the world, but he's a great guy to have around. Everybody loves to come and pet him and love on him. And
I love that.
Great little dog.
Yeah. Well, we're speaking the same language, the same love language of dogs. We have a dog. We actually have two dogs, but our youngest dog is Vizsla, and his name is Oakley. And so my wife brings, he's actually my service dog, but my wife brings him to school with her every day. And so he's become like the school mascot as well.
Right,
So now she's at the middle school, and so the middle school students love him, love having him there. And I think it just brings, such great joy. People really love having a dog around, whether it's a French bulldog or a Vizsla.
Absolutely.
You can't have enough dogs.
and actually on that topic, Ann and I actually have 4 dogs.
Okay, yeah, 4
we
dogs.
have a golden retriever, a black lab, and then, as usual, if I would just listen to my wife, stories, she wanted French bulldogs to begin with, and my attitude was, I don't want a little French bulldog, so we got the golden retriever, and then ended up getting a black lab to be friends.
Okay.
And we were at a local shop during COVID, outside eating at a restaurant.
Yeah.
And somebody came up with a whole bunch of little Frenchie puppies, and she wanted to go look at them at the house. Oh. And you know what that means, you're getting one. So.
Yeah, once you walk in the door.
So we ended up going up and came home with a French bulldog, and then we were walking down the wharf about probably 6 months after that, and there was a big French bulldog with a Marine, and I knew he was a Marine because the French bulldog had a harness on that had Marine Corps E6 stripes.
Oh, really?
Him.
Oh.
And so I told my wife, that big French bulldog is a cool dog.
Yeah.
I'd like to have one of those. But I meant when these other 3 dogs, unfortunately dogs don't live as long as us,
right.
that when these weren't with us anymore, we'd get one. Well, then she found Callahan, and I fell in love with them, and so now we have 4 dogs.
Callahan clearly has some roots in the Dirty Harry sequel, and the Enforcer. I love it. So great name for a good police dog.
Yeah, and like you and I were talking about, it was definitely a nod to Clint and being from this area and growing up.
Yeah.
In the 80s, Dirty Harry was all the rage.
Yes.
Clearly not politically correct now, but Callahan, it's a nod to Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry Callahan, who was an inspector with the San Francisco Police Department in Hollywood during the 70s and 80s when we were growing up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, we named our dog Oakley. Number one, we had a Vizsla that was a female many, many years ago, and she was Little Ann, and so we called her Annie. And so then this time we had Oakley, the Annie Oakley. But also, being deployed in combat, my preferred protective eyewear was always the Oakley brand. So we always joke about our dog. We're like, he's a brand ambassador.
Right,
He's got a name.
Actually, these are Oakleys.
There you go.
Seems like military and police. We all like the Oakley glasses.
Yeah. Well, Chief, I know you mentioned your wife. Now, how long have you been married?
Oh, boy. Now you're trying to get me in trouble. We got married in 1991, so then I got to do math.
Yeah.
But a long time, and clearly the best decision I ever made in my life. I got very lucky. Ann and I met at San Jose State, where we were both students. I was 4 years older than her, so that's always kind of the joke that I was a senior, she was a freshman. We we should have graduated in the same year she graduated high school. I should have graduated college, but I was on the 4.5-year plan. So might not have met her if it wasn't for that.
Yeah.
And we've raised 3 great sons.
Yeah, 3 sons. Okay.
Yeah. And, here we sit in Shoreline, and I wasn't much of a churchgoer, and actually grew up in a family that was not a religious family. But interestingly, we moved to Scotts Valley. My dad was a San Jose police officer, and so Scotts Valley was, a half hour from San Jose. And we moved there when I was in the 6th grade, and I had a great friend who was part of a Baptist church.
Okay.
And so ended up going to church with him for a long time and got baptized in the Baptist church in Scotts Valley, where I grew up.
Okay.
And then kind of went away from that for a while. And then after college, when Anna and I got married, she's always had religion in her life.
Yeah.
But I used to tease her because when she was baptized, she was sprinkled over the head. And I used to tell her, you weren't really baptized, because in a Baptist church, it's a full immersion, just like Shoreline was doing out at the beach.
You got it. Yeah.
So,
full immersion.
Yeah, that was my teasing my wife that, you haven't really been baptized. And eventually she did that. We spent a lot of time up at Twin Lakes Church in Aptos.
Oh, yeah, in Aptos, yeah. Great church. Yeah. Pastor Renee.
Oh, he's a phenomenal speaker.
Oh, yeah.
But then when our kids got baptized, and we did the ocean thing too. So she got rebaptized in the ocean, so she was fully immersed. But that was always kind of my joke with her was, you haven't really been baptized.
Yeah.
So yeah, she's an educator. She's been doing that for almost as long as I've been a police officer. She's been there about 30 years.
Okay.
Doing that, loves elementary education, and we have 3 sons, Logan, Ryan, and Shawn. And Logan's 28, and he's a chef up in Oregon. Ryan served 5 years in the Army.
Okay.
Got out as an E5 at Fort Carson. So he's in Colorado Springs and looking to be, I hate to say this, but he's looking to be a firefighter.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
I don't really hate to say it, but there's always the jokes between the police.
That'll make an
fire
interesting
department.
Thanksgiving conversation.
Right. And then our youngest, Shawn, is a junior this year at CU Boulder. So 2 of them are in Colorado.
Oh, he's up there at prime time.
Yeah,
huh?
yeah.
Oh,
And
he caught up in the whirlwind there.
And that came his sophomore year. Is when
yeah.
Dion got there. So yeah, he's been on national TV several times because he's in the front with all the kids. When they have all their crazy costumes and the buffs,
game
horns
day.
on, and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, I love it. Yeah,
he's having a great time.
Yeah. Well, you had mentioned it's neat because when we were talking earlier last month, I think it was, and we have so many commonalities in that you have a Ryan and a Shawn, and our firstborn son is Ryan Shawn.
Named after Dad.
Yeah, there you go.
Name,
yeah. And also we spent my second tour as an officer. My second assignment was at Fort Carson with the 212 Infantry Battalion. So we love Colorado Springs. Beautiful area. Just such a family-friendly town, but really just you're minutes away from being in the mountains, but yet just the temperate climate. You get snow in the winter, so you get to deal with that a little bit, but it's not brutal like Minnesota and North Dakota where I grew up. So, but
that's interesting because I go there and we love Colorado. My cousin has a place in Crested Butte, so we spend a lot of time in Colorado. Okay. But it's funny because I go there and the weather is so different than California, and there's a saying that Californians are so weak when it comes to the weather.
Yeah.
But an interesting perspective, I haven't spent any time in Michigan or Minnesota or anywhere that. And so that's a lot harsher than Colorado, huh?
Yeah, when you have to start your car 30 minutes before you go to work just so the windows defrost.
Wow, yeah.
It's when you get stuck in your driveway, like you have to get the snowblower out so you can go to work. Yeah, that tells you it's brutal. So it creates all new dynamics that, if you live in California, you're like,
don't have to deal with that,
You start your car and you go off to work. So it's a different lifestyle. Let's put it that way, yeah.
And it is interesting because my cousin and my son tell me it'll be snowing. I'm like, oh, we're not going to be able to get to wherever we're going. Just wait for a couple hours or tomorrow it'll all be gone, which is very different than Tahoe.
Yeah.
Which I guess is a wetter snow base than the dry Colorado. But Colorado's, we love going there. We spend a lot of time there. And like you say, you can be in a big city and within a half hour, you're in the mountains, the true mountains.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah.
So now, Chief, when did you first realize you wanted to sort of follow in your father's footsteps and become a police officer, work in law enforcement? Just give it kind of a snapshot. Do you remember when that was?
It's interesting because my father was a San Jose police officer. He retired as a sergeant after 22 years. And so when you're a kid, I think that all kids, if they have positive relationships with their parents, they look up to that and they want to do what their parents are doing. My mom was a teacher for a while, and then she got very involved in business, went and got her MBA and was a chief financial officer. But I always wanted to be a cop. I mean, I can't remember a time that I didn't. So I remember my dad coming home because we lived in San Jose and he was a San Jose police officer. He'd come home for dinner and he'd be in his uniform. And so I just always remember it so much so that even I remember our leather belts that we wear, that we have all our equipment on. They make a noise that, most people don't notice. And I probably wouldn't even notice it now, but I remember as a child, there's things that you pay attention to that you don't even know you're paying attention to. And I remember when he'd take his gun belt off, the sound that the leather made. And I think that that's just kind of indicative of when you're a kid, you just notice, you're aware of things that we just get used to them as adults. And so I just, based on all those things, I don't know that I ever not wanted to be a police officer. However, there's always a caveat. My mom was very much into business, and she did not want us to be police officers. And I think a lot of that was, she's concerned about the danger and all of the aspects that have to do with policing. So she always pushed us away from policing. And like when we went to school, she told us she wanted us to major in business and those kinds of things. And I don't usually do what I'm told, so I majored in this great major that you can do so many things with, political science, which you can't do much with. So there was always kind of this struggle because I always wanted to be a police officer, but she always kind of didn't want us to do that. But when I got to college, they had a cadet program at San Jose State University. So I just kind of fell into that and was a cadet and loved it, and then was able to get a job as what we have here in Monterey, and a lot of police departments have, community service officers at the Santa Cruz Police Department. So I really started from the time I was probably 19 years old. I started getting into it. I looked at different things in college, but really knew that this is what really my calling was. That I wanted to do.
And then you also served in our military as well. Thank you for your service, by the way, as we move into the month of November, and we're celebrating, really honoring our military veterans. Thank you for your service. Tell us a little bit about that. How did that military service help really shape you in the leader you are today, but also reinforce your desire to serve in law enforcement?
Sure. So I'm always leery, or I'm not at ease with saying that I really even served in the military. Because quite honestly, I always had an interest in that. And when I was in college, I was a sophomore. Again, my parents didn't want me to join the military, but I looked at the different branches and ended up enlisting in the Navy because I wanted to be a corpsman. And I thought that would be useful and helpful if I wanted to be a police officer to get medical training. So I went there to boot camp in between my sophomore and junior year in college as an enlisted sailor. Looked around at all that and saw all the officers with their really cool Corvettes, and at the time Trans Ams, which was a big thing because of Smokey and the Bear.
You got it.
And thought, man, I'm going to school. Why not go through ROTC? But didn't want to go active duty because I wanted to be a police officer, but I wanted to serve in the reserve or the guard. So the only way at that time that you could do that was with the Army. And so I moved from the Navy Reserve and then was part of the Army ROTC at San Jose State. And so did that. And the discussion you kind of wanted to talk about today was leadership, and you specifically asked how did that shape me with the leadership that I have today. And really, prior to us talking, there was So I went through Army ROTC, and for those who haven't been through that, basically it's one class a semester or two for 2 to 4 years that covers all kinds of things about the military. Now, I went through 2 years of Army ROTC, and I think the different branches probably do that a little bit differently.
Yeah.
But my experience with that was phenomenal leadership training and doing things that really brought to bear things that I didn't understand at the time that our cadre were teaching us. And there was a major, and I think at about that rank, 03 is when, or 02, they come back to teach at ROTC programs. And there was a Major Mapstone who was a signal officer who still just stands out in my mind because he was not my impression at that time of what a military officer would be, which would be yelling and screaming and telling everybody what to do.
Yeah.
And that was my impression. But really, what they taught us was leadership is not about screaming, yelling at people. It's about taking care of people, knowing your job, and really putting others before yourself. Yeah. And so Major Mapstone was this leader that kind of infused all of this in us.
Yeah.
And then we'd go out into the field, and I remember one of the stories that I talk to people about now that are becoming leaders in our organization, that they told me that I had to give a class to all of the other ROTC cadets to strip down and put together an M16 rifle.
Oh, there you go.
And I remember at the time thinking, why is the new guy, why do I have to do this? I don't know how to do this.
Yeah.
All of these other people know how to do this, and now I have to do this, and I'm not going to do it right. Well, so I did that, stripped it down, but it wasn't, what I learned later is the point was not me doing that. What it taught me was I had to go spend a lot of time taking the M16 apart, putting it back together, taking it apart, putting it back together, learning all the components of it.
Yep.
Because if you're teaching somebody to do that, you have to make sure that you know how to do that.
Exactly.
But that didn't hit me even till probably 3, 4, 5, or maybe when I became a sergeant at the police department. That's like, oh, this is why they had me doing this, is because when you teach something, there's an old saying that if you really want to learn about something, teach it.
Yeah,
it will,
exactly. I was just going to say
tell
that.
You. Right.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
And so, honestly, in preparing kind of for our talk today, I have that. It was FM 22100 military leadership that I still have on my credenza behind my desk at work, because the things that Major Mapstone and the other cadre taught us really resonated for me till in my current leadership role, and really lead by example was, harp, and take care of your people. There were 7 or 8 different aspects to what they really hit on, but those 2 things, leading by example and taking care of your people, really, and I didn't even realize it at that time. It wasn't till I really was put into some leadership positions that I understood what great training that was. And so there was classroom training, there was field training, and then I went to another summer in Washington at Fort Lewis, where we did a whole bunch of things. And they had another thing there called the Leadership Challenge, where they would put 4 of us together, groups of 4, and they had all these crazy things in about 16 different areas in little, I don't know how to explain, but you're outside and they're like 16 different areas in a very close proximity. You remember it.
Oh, yeah. The leadership reaction course, right?
And they'd have these crazy things you had to do where they'd have different size poles with weights on them.
Yeah.
And you had to accomplish these different tasks that if it was just you would not be successful. You needed 4 people, and it wasn't just for the physical challenge, but it was for the different ideas that somebody would look at something and go, hey, this is how we're going to do it. Yeah. And somebody else would go, what if we try it this way? And part of leadership is not just leading, but being a good follower.
Oh, yeah.
And oftentimes, if you're just leading and not being a good follower, then you're not going to accomplish things, because really what that teaches you is you have to listen to different perspectives to get to success.
Yeah.
And so even in the moment, I didn't understand what the LRC was teaching us, but it was teaching us that when there's a leader, you have to listen to that, but you also have to give positive input.
Yes.
But let them still lead. And you have to be a good follower. And all that stuff came together in that 2-year process that was the best leadership training that I've ever had. And maybe it was because that was the first exposure that I ever had to leadership. And so it really kind of focused me, and everything else that now I've been to a lot of leadership courses, but I always come back to Army ROTC and how phenomenal that training was, and not even realizing that at the time.
Yeah, and Chief, we share some common background there. I also did I did a 3-year ROTC scholarship. I'd served enlisted in the Army for 5 years, got out as a sergeant, went back to school and did ROTC. And I will echo that. I did the leadership reaction course. I did the officer training at Fort Lewis my senior year, which would at the time was 1990. And I remember the leadership reaction. I still remember it today because I remember one of the tasks that we had was we actually had, there was this large kind of a frame. It was probably like 20 feet. And then there were level like platforms.
Right.
And one of, and I'm going to say this, and, for our audience, that's okay for them to know this. Pastor Shawn is deathly afraid of heights. So I'm going to say it, get it out there. That's my kryptonite.
Right.
And so now, and what they do is, you remember, they would assign a specific cadet. So you have 4 people, you'd be assigned one. Okay, now you're in charge. Okay, you're in charge. Here's the scenario. Ready, go. And then you got to, do what you're going to do. And wouldn't you know it, that was the one I got put in charge of, was you have to get your team and equipment up this platform to the very top.
Yeah.
And my knees are shaking as I'm looking. Oh. And so what that taught me is you've got to be ready to listen to different perspectives, because I had no clue how we were going to accomplish this obstacle, but also be able to confront your fears, and to do that with your team around you, knowing that, hey, you've got to, as a leader, you've got to be able to step up and you've got to be able to lead, even when you're fearful in those situations.
Right.
So I remember that to this day. That was really, and so I would echo that. The training I received at Reserve Officer Training Corps, specifically at the advanced course at Fort Lewis, was fantastic training. So it's great to hear we both had similar, and I'm sure that there's lots of folks who are in our audience that maybe also went through some sort of military training would attest to that. So, but Chief, as you've continued to, as you came in, and you continue to advance in your leadership, you talked about to really lead by example and take care of your people. I think that's just a great bookend, really the heart and soul of a great leader. As you've moved up in your leadership role, talk to us about adaptive leadership. Like, how have you as a leader really adapted as you continue to advance and really move into different departments as well? Because the leadership is going to look different maybe in San Jose that it might in Monterey. Mm-hmm. There's going to be different leadership style, but ultimately I'm sure it's the same core leadership philosophy, leadership style you bring. But there are nuances in different departments, different locations, different times, those types of things. So just think about adaptive leadership. How has your leadership really adapted over the years?
Sure. And maybe I'll reframe that a little bit, and specific to policing, though I think there would be some similarities with the military, and just for others who aren't in those two realms. I mean, we see a lot of military leaders like Jocko that come out of the military and really try to transition that to business. And I think, so to speak to the bigger audience about leadership in general, I'll kind of start with policing. So the bookend where I started with Army ROTC, and I didn't finish on that topic, and I said that sometimes I'm a little bit reticent in talking about my military service. I really just did 2 or 3 years in the Guard. There were no wars going on. Yeah. And then I transitioned to really being involved at my job at San Jose PD and got out and went in the IRR. So I don't feel like I'm worthy to really say that I served. I took advantage of some great opportunities to learn a lot that the military provided to me. But from that beginning of understanding some leadership to being a police officer, I have a true belief, and I tell the folks that I work with now that I believe, especially in policing, that we're all leaders. We're always being looked at, whether we're on duty or off duty, and it is incumbent upon us. When I hire new folks, I always tell them, listen, you represent all of us. You need to understand and acknowledge that first and foremost you represent yourself, but then you represent your family, then you represent our organization, the Monterey Police Department, and then all who police. So anything that you're doing reflects on all of those realms.
That's right.
But you should have pride in yourself to understand, to remember who you are and what you represent. And so from there, I really believe we're all leaders. And sometimes there's a difference, I think, between leadership and positional leadership, that I currently sit at the head of my organization, but there are certainly leaders throughout that organization that might not hold a rank. I might have some senior police officers who are very definitively leaders in our organization. And so I talk to folks too about the fact that we're all leaders and we all need to make sure that we are looking out for each other and that we are helping each other out, because I believe that that's a part of leadership. So I think there's a difference too between the positional leadership and just the ability to lead. And I think that all of us and everything that we're doing, and clearly we're talking to a church group now, but people that go to this church represent this church as well. And so their opportunity when they're out there in the community talking to people represents Shoreline Church and what they're doing. And people will consider what Shoreline Church is based on the membership here and what they're doing. So I think that to kind of bring it to this audience, I believe that no matter what it is we're doing in life, we're representing first and foremost ourselves and our families, but whatever that venture is that we are currently involved in, everything we do is reflecting on that. And so then to kind of transition to the different positional leadership aspects. In police work, when you're a police officer, you have a lot of autonomy and you have to make decisions, in some cases very quickly, for a variety of issues, all of the issues that we deal with. And that's, I think, why many of us get into policing. A lot of us are ADD and we like doing a whole bunch of different things, but we also like to be forced to think quickly and make decisions, just like people in the military have to do. And so as an officer, you have a lot of autonomy to do things. It doesn't mean that you don't have supervision and oversight, but when you come on to things, you have to immediately address those issues and start taking care of business. And then when you become a first line sergeant, now, as anybody who's been in a positional leadership position knows, you now have to start looking out, not only looking out for those people, but part of looking out for people is training them, telling them what they need to do. But then sometimes a harder thing to do is tell people when they're not doing things right. It's always easy to say, hey, you did great on this. You did great on this. You did great on this. Sometimes it's not so hard to say, hey, when you were doing that, and I'm just talking about tactical issues, maybe in how you're dealing with somebody on the street, maybe, hey, you kind of lost, you were losing your patience with that person. And believe me, I don't have a lot of patience, but we learn that we have to employ patience for different things. So sometimes telling people that, and especially I see in our society today that, and I equate leadership a lot with parenting too, because there's nothing that we love more than our children. But I believe that it's our job to set boundaries for them and really positively encourage them when they do right. But also let them know when they're going outside of the bounds and telling them you're not doing right here. And I believe it's the same when you're leading people in any aspect that you're leading them in my current aspect with that. And I'm not saying that the people that I'm leading are children, but it's very similar. I love them to death. I set standards for them, but I need to tell them when they're not doing things appropriately. And a lot of times I see that that's hard. And so coming back around to being a first line supervisor as a sergeant in policing, that's a hard transition because it's now not your job to just do the job and take care of things. Now you need to be looking bigger picture, training people, taking care of them, making sure that they're understanding what their responsibilities are, that they understand, but also telling them, hey, let me help you get better on this. Let me tell you where you can do something better. And so to me in policing, that first transition to being a first line supervisor is a difficult one because that's your first supervisory role. And all of those things that we talk about in military training and those kinds of things come to bear with that. And when you talk about adaptive leadership, I mean, there's all kinds of different, we talk about democratic leadership. We talk about transformative leadership. We talk about all these different kinds of leadership, servant leadership. But I really believe that, and there was a saying that I love, and I saw this, and I can't remember where I got this from, but it talks about the price of leadership is self-interest. And I believe that the best leaders are not becoming leaders because they want to be important and because of their self-interest, but I really believe and I really come to servant leadership, it's because they want to help those people in this endeavor that they're in, be it the military or policing or business or whatever it is. And really, it's a love for what you're doing and wanting to promote that endeavor. In my case, policing, loving policing. Yeah. The fact that I had a dad who I really respected in what he was doing in policing. And sometimes as kids and even as adults, we blame our parents for everything. Right. Sometimes I felt like, why was my mom always telling me not to do policing? And I wanted to prove to her that this endeavor is righteous and it's good, and we shouldn't dissuade people from policing. We should make that endeavor better. Right. And the way we can do that is by ensuring that we're leading that correctly. And that love for policing then, as a good leader, I wanted to be able to have a more positive impact. And so truly, I never envisioned that I'd be a chief. When I went to the San Jose Police Department, I wanted to retire as a lieutenant because I thought I'd have a little more input on things that were going on. So I started with the sergeant thing. That sergeants and officers really are providing the services on the street. So when you're out on the street dealing with things, you're seeing sergeants and officers, and they're the ones getting the work done. I believe in my role and in what I call my command staff's role is to serve our officers and sergeants and the ones that are on the street so they can serve the community. Yeah. And so if I'm not positively encouraging them and being positive with them and getting them the things they need and empowering them and making them feel that they are the most important thing, that I don't believe they're going to do that with our community. Right. So that's kind of my leadership theory on how we're doing things. But you asked about kind of that moving through the adaptive leadership. When you become a command officer, which is really the next step from sergeant to lieutenant, and police departments are similar. They might call those different things, but in the military, it's kind of a difference between the enlisted corps and the officer corps. The officer corps, yeah. And so there's always this little tension between the enlisted and the officer corps. But as you pointed out, being what we call a Mustang, being enlisted first and then becoming an officer, which is how the Israeli IDF really, you start enlisted and then move through. That's how we do it in policing. You have to be an officer in this country to transition up. And I think that is a great thing because now you understand what it is. From the ground up. From the ground up. And so that transition then from sergeant to lieutenant. Well, now when you're a lieutenant, you're command. And so that's more a staff job. Okay. You are now dealing with discipline issues. You're now dealing with things where there is somewhat of a tension, but a good policing organization tries to really have a great communication. And if they're doing things right, I had an old boss, Bill Lansdowne, who was the chief of the San Jose Police Department. He was an assistant chief in San Jose, and then he went to Richmond where he was a chief, then he came back to San Jose as a chief, and then he retired from the San Diego Police Department. And he would do things that I remember as an officer, I go, why is he doing that? But he was brilliant. But he had a saying that as a chief and as an executive, you sit on a stool with three legs. And in policing, you have to keep those three legs balanced. And if you lose one of them, you're going to lose your job as chief. Wow. And so one is to keep your community happy. And you have to be involved with your community. You have to understand what's important to them. And sometimes in policing, I think that some police professionals forget that because they think they know how everything's going and what's happening. And we've seen a great change in policing. But when we talk about community policing, that's about engaging the community. Previously, cops and police leaders thought that we know everything and they weren't taking into account what is going on in our communities. But a lot of that it's the perception of the community.
Right.
And we have to listen to what that perception is, because we might know, no, there's not all that crime that you perceive, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
The truth is what is their perception,
Yep,
and what
exactly.
can we do to address that, because they're feeling that.
Right.
And if they're feeling that, there's truth to that. So that was one leg, keeping the community
happy. Yeah.
functional and happy. The next is the politicians and the media have to be happy with what we're doing, which is kind of a realm of that community part. But the politicians and the media offer this whole other aspect that we need to. I had another boss who called it care and feeding. We have to care and feed that aspect.
Yeah, right.
And then the third is our workforce, and that is our officers. And in policing, especially in California, we have labor that have unions, which I think is a great thing, because that, to me, makes me a better boss to ensure that I'm doing the things that are creating a fairness, which in any workplace there needs to be fairness. So I fully support that, and that perspective comes from growing up in a police organization where I believe that labor aspect is a very important part. And I think that as a good leader, there's going to be tension. But you need to talk through that tension with your workforce, just like you would the tension with the community, or a tension with the media or politicians. So you have to keep all three of those groups in a positive place. And so as a command officer, you're starting to understand those aspects. And other chiefs, Bill Lansdowne and another mentor of mine, Rob Davis, would talk about training us that when you become in these higher positions, in those, you have to see the bigger picture, and you have to understand there's more than just the aspect of one perspective or the perspective of just one of those three things. You need to understand all three of those things. You need to serve all three of those things and a whole lot more.
Oh, yeah.
And so going from sergeant to lieutenant, that's a big shift too, because now you're not really just one of the troops, and you have to now start dealing with disciplinary issues. And when you start disciplining people, depending on I believe how you do that, if you're being respectful, if you're doing it fair, and we see this in different leaders, sometimes they aren't being fair in the way that they're doing things, and they don't like somebody, and so now they're doing things, and it's my belief in growing up the San Jose Police Department, this was a huge aspect of, it doesn't matter who the person is, it needs to be fair across the board for what we're doing, and that's what a professional does.
Exactly,
So there's a lot that I've kind of thrown out here, but all of these leadership it's to me kind of like policing. I don't get to be out on the street dealing with all these issues that are coming up, but to me now in my position, there's a lot of strategy, because different things happen. It's just different than the emergent things that are happening on the street. But different things are always coming up. And you asked about, well, let me finish this thought. So then at the San Jose Police Department, there's different ranks. So then there's lieutenant, but command staff is kind of command staff. Once you hit lieutenant, then there's captain, there's deputy chief, and then there's an assistant chief and the chief. All of those positions, though, the higher you go, they're very similar in that you're just having more aspects of having more influence on things that are going on. And once you become the chief, the buck stops with you. So it's like being the captain of the ship. But in command, you're always told you represent the chief of police. Everything you're doing now represents the chief of police, and you need to understand that perspective. But until you sit in that chief's chair, the buck kind of stops with you, but not really. And so the chief makes all kinds of decisions, the final decisions about where are we going to go with discipline. If an officer's getting disciplined, are we going to do training here? What policies are we going to set? If the community is concerned about something, what direction are we going to give that we need to go deal with this issue? And so being in that chair is very different than any of the other chairs. And so in San Jose, I was a deputy chief, and I ran 3 of the 4 bureaus there. One of them, in my last role there for the last year, I was in charge of all of the uniformed police. Every uniformed cop in San Jose, which is about 900 people, I was responsible for. And so that is a huge responsibility. But I still wasn't sitting in the chief's chair. I understood the chief's perspective, and I always believe that a good leader is looking to what their boss needs, and we're helping their boss be successful.
Right.
And so I need to be thinking ahead to help my boss be successful. I should always be thinking above as well as to my subordinates.
Right.
But until you sit in that chair, you don't have it. You're helping your chief make decisions, but ultimately it's the chief that's making those decisions. So then I came to Monterey almost a decade ago, and there are 53 police officers here, but leadership to me is leadership. And it comes back to lead by example and care for your people. And so in the position that I'm in now, the leadership is the same. But now I sit in that chair where those decisions that have to be made. So even though I was in charge of 700, 800, 900 people previously, and I have 69 now with our professional staff, the decisions are somewhat different in that the final aspect comes to me. But I will tell you that coming here, it was like a huge blessing. And I really feel I have this great pride that I was able to come here, and the Monterey Police Department is a phenomenal police department for several reasons. You'll hear people talking about why their organizations are great, but the San Jose Police Department and the Monterey Police Department really have a bedrock of ethics and a work ethic. And everything to me springs from there. And so when I came to Monterey, it was very similar to San Jose, because in Monterey, the police officers want to be working. In Monterey, it's all based on ethics of doing the right thing. And so I really inherited that. And with some of the things that we've done, really what I have done is provided some direction, but really I try to let the officers know that they are our number one priority, and it's my job to serve them and to really listen to what their concerns are and what's going on with them. We've built a great command team. So there's 5 of us. There's me, a assistant chief, and 3 lieutenants. And we have a phenomenal team. We're all different. We all think a little bit differently. And we all have some really great strengths, and we all have weaknesses, but we have this team that really works together.
Oh, that's great to hear.
We have 9 sergeants that are phenomenal, and the rest are officers who are phenomenal people who are doing great things and really want to serve this community. And so things that we've done at the Monterey Police Department that sometimes I get the credit for, almost all of those ideas come from within. And I like to say yes. I like to try things, and sometimes we do it for a while, sometimes we don't. But talking through leadership, I believe that instead of saying no, sometimes saying yes is hard, because if we just keep doing the same things, it's easy because we're already doing them.
You're right.
But if people come up with ideas and they want to do these things, like, okay, that's going to take work. And that's harder to do because you're changing something. But if these ideas are coming from people and you're implementing them, it values them and what their perceptions are too. And now they're involved and believe that they're a part of this. So that's kind of a long-winded way to say, talking about adaptive leadership and adapting from San Jose to Monterey. Yes, there's very different issues. But to me, being in Monterey is a great thing. And I'll tell you that the 2 biggest issues that I hear about here are quality of life issues surrounding homelessness and traffic issues. And when I go to talk to different groups about that, those are problems and issues that I'll take all day long, because in other policing organizations, you're dealing with all kinds of very violent issues that are very, very difficult to address. That certainly doesn't mean that homelessness isn't difficult to address. But they're very different issues, and it gives us more time here to try to address those issues. And so at the Monterey Police Department, we have a community action team, which really is officers just assigned to those quality of life issues. And we created a multidisciplinary outreach team where we bring about 7 different social workers that don't work for the Monterey Police Department, but we've invited them into the police department, and we've done backgrounds on them. They don't work for us, but they have what we call touchdown spaces at the police department. So they have keys to the police department. They can come into the police department, have computers and other workstations. And so they come to our police department once or twice a week. Social workers from CHOMP, from county social workers that are dealing with adult protective services, that are dealing with mobile crisis, that are part of mental health aspects, that are part of Veterans of Transition Center. So all these different groups that come together. And so what's really happening there is when our officers identify people, and most of the time the homeless that we're dealing with, it's a group of usually service-resistant homeless people that are not obtaining services or that suffer from mental issues or addictions. And so those are the folks that we're dealing with a lot. But because we have these social worker connections that are not just, hey, call over to social work in Salinas and see if you can talk to somebody. They've created relationships with these people. They know each other by a first name. And so when they run into folks that they run into all the time in the city of Monterey that are homeless and that are service resistant, they always ask them, hey, can we get you anything? And most of the time they say no. But there comes a time at which sometimes they say yes, and they say, great. But this might not be during regular business hours. This might be at 2 a.m. And the person's cold says, yes, please, I want some services. I say, okay. I might not be able to do anything tomorrow, but where are you going to be tomorrow during the day? Well, I'm going to be here. All right. I'm going to send one of these people over to come talk to you. And they send an email to somebody on that team or to the whole team. Say, hey, I ran into this person last night. They were here. They said they're going to be here today. Can the CAT team or can some of these social workers go and meet with this person? And let's see if we can navigate the system. And so sometimes it's not just that these folks don't want services, but it's also that we're trying to navigate through a very difficult system. So I equate this to any of us who've had to go through a medical procedure or a medical system or a dental system where we go to the doctor, we see the doctor, they say you need these things, and now we're dealing with the insurance stuff at the back end of that, right?
Referrals.
So all these
the
different
mountain of bureaucracy
aspects that come to play, it's difficult for us that are high-functioning people to navigate through those things. Well, now you have somebody who's suffering not only from maybe a mental issue or an addiction issue, but probably aren't the most high-functioning folks, and this is maybe why they're on the street in the first place. And now we put in front of them, okay, well, here's the services, but to get these services, you have to do A, B, C, D, or E. It's difficult for them to function through that. But these social workers, if we connect them with them, they can help them work through that. At the police department, we actually gave up one of our community service officer positions so that we could fund a homeless navigator and hired a homeless navigator. Now,
really? Wow.
In social work, there's a lot of turnover, and we have Chomp just did this great thing with the Ohana Center. Well, the Ohana Center hired our social worker that we had as our homeless navigator, which is great because they're doing great things up there. But now I have to hire another homeless navigator. But the idea is that this now is a social worker who works specifically for the Monterey Police Department in conjunction with our officers and these other folks that can now help navigate through these different aspects. So those are different ideas that I'd love to say were all Dave Hober's ideas, but they weren't. These all came from inside the Monterey Police Department with experimenting with different things and different ideas to bring these things forward so that we can be creative in the way that we're doing things. But when you ask a difference between the San Jose Police Department and the Monterey Police Department or other police departments, because we're not faced with all that violent crime, we have the ability to now, I think, offer a better police service
Right.
because we have more time to focus on those things. Now, it certainly doesn't mean that we don't have crime and other issues that we're dealing with,
Right, yeah.
but we don't have,
Yeah.
knock on wood, a lot of the violent crime that other police departments, they have to resource that first
To deal with
and
that,
so
yeah.
that is a big difference here. I think also that it's a much more positive working environment here in Monterey than it is sometimes in other cities. If you're a police officer dealing with a lot of violence, that also equates to a lot of suffering
Yeah.
for the people that you're seeing who've been victims of that,
Yeah.
but also the people that are involved in that are perpetrating those crimes. They don't just get into that because they decide they want to get into that. Those people are also suffering because they're coming from lower economic issues. There's a lot of things going on, and that creates a lot of negativity that creates a lens for those police officers that after years and years of doing that it creates a human negativeness that isn't so pronounced here in Monterey. And so I think that this is a much better working environment for our police officers. And that brings me to another aspect of policing, and that is that we've seen a huge decline in those that want to be police officers.
Okay.
Which creates a huge challenge for us in all of policing. It's very difficult for me to find police officers, so I'm staffed at 53 sworn officers.
Okay.
And I'd like that to be more. It should be more, quite frankly.
Yeah.
But with that 53 officers, I have a hard time filling those positions because I don't have a lot of candidates. And what I started with was those people that I want in policing. I want them to be the best and the brightest. I want them to understand people.
Yeah.
I want them to be educated, and I have to make sure that in their backgrounds that they have not been involved in things in their background, either financially, where they're not financially responsible, any kind of violence. But, I've raised 3 kids too, and I need to understand that people are people, and I think I have a great understanding with that. So I understand that sometimes people go through things and we hire them, given our different realms of what we're doing. So this is also a call out that we need police officers. We're hiring. We need good people.
Yeah.
So please, if you're interested, apply to the Monterey Police Department, and we'd love to have you go through the process. And we love to hire local people because the other issue with trying to hire police officers in Monterey is we all know that it's very expensive to live
the cost
here.
of living, it affects us all,
But if you're up in the Bay Area, you can commute from all these different areas, and there's a huge population there. Here, our built-up area kind of ends in Carmel, right? And then we don't have a lot south, and we don't have anything west because we have the Bay.
Right.
So to come here, the people to commute here, it's limited because from Santa Cruz County, you can come from maybe Santa Cruz, Santa Clara County, maybe Morgan Hill, and that just leaves us this population. So if people that grew up in Monterey County or our adjoining counties in Santa Cruz County or South Santa Clara County, if they're already established here, that helps us with retaining people.
Yeah.
And so we're always looking for great people. And sometimes people ask me, what is it you're looking for in a cop? And that's a hard nut to crack because what I'm looking for is somebody who loves people, really cares about people, but also somebody that if I have a really bad situation, they're willing to run toward gunfire and help and put themselves on the line to run into that very, very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
So I'm looking for this really caring type A personality, right?
Yeah.
Which is hard to find.
Exactly.
That really caring person who's also willing to, because if you think about that, a lot of times really, really caring people, they don't have that kind of type A,
No,
I'm going to go
right.
take
No,
care of this
exactly
thing.
right. Yeah.
So to
counter.
get that combination is a very difficult aspect to find. But there's a lot of folks out there.
Yeah.
And I think that working in Monterey is the Monterey Police Department is a great, great place to work. I think we have a great organization.
Yeah.
And I'd love to have folks apply and come work for us, and
Yeah.
especially local folks that I'm sure are attending your church.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great, because I was thinking about that. One of the questions I had was how can our audience, how can we, Chief, how can we be ambassadors for you and for Monterey Police Department? How can we better help? And that's one way. It sounds like is if we know young folks, people that meet that, that type A, but also somebody that cares deeply for people, would be a good candidate, potentially a good candidate. So, but how else can we help beyond that? Besides getting the word out and looking, within our respective, maybe our neighbors, maybe the friends we have, or family members. By the way, I think we talked about this, but my son, our youngest son, actually is a law enforcement officer in Scottsdale, and I would agree 100% with what you said. They spend a lot more time, even in Scottsdale, which is a fairly affluent community down there in the Phoenix area. They spend a lot of time dealing with violent crime, and that takes away from their ability to be, involved at a greater level with dealing with issues of homelessness and other areas of caring for people and caring for the community. So it's great to hear that Monterey, you've got an adaptive approach to resolving that, but also a very collaborative approach, Chief. But how else can we help? What else could we do as citizens of Monterey County, for those of us who are participating on this podcast today who live in this area? How can we help support you, Chief?
Sure. So a couple of things there that I want to touch on. So you talk about your son and the issues that he's dealing with. Another thing that we've learned, and I started this in 1988, so I'm coming up on 37 years of being a part of this whole policing adventure. And one of the things that we've really learned is that we have to take care of our people. We have to allow them the ability to say, hey, that last call I was on, that's hurting me. I'm really hurting on that. Yeah. And we need to get them resources. And when I started in this job, and it's very similar in the military, it was kind of like, hey, suck it up. This is what you signed up for.
That's right.
Get in there and do it. And we don't talk about this. Well, we certainly know now that we have to talk about things, and we have to support that we're humans. And when we see things, and I don't want to downplay that in Monterey, the cops aren't dealing with these things. I mean, while they might not be dealing with that violence on a daily basis, because there's less officers here, they deal with all of the traumatic issues that happen. I mean, all kinds of things with child deaths, with people that have been involved in different kinds of accidents that create all kinds of issues that greatly affects them. And because there's not as many officers here, that they're dealing with that on a more frequent basis, I think, sometimes even than in the big cities. But to your son, so in relating this back to what your folks can do for me, what I would say is not for me, it's for the cops that are on the street that are doing this job, is that when I was growing up in our garage, there was a picture that was taken in the 1970s, because my dad was a cop, that it showed a profile of a police officer like at nighttime, and he's standing on the side of the street, and it's kind of a poem that somebody had written. It wasn't a poem. It was something that was in Life magazine in the 70s. It said, do you want to know how to support your police? And it goes through all these things that police officers are dealing with that we've kind of touched on. But the bottom line was, the next time you see a police officer, smile at them and wave at them. And really it gets back to this, the things that we need to understand of caring for people. It comes back to, it's not just to police officers, but anybody that we see, right? So like we're on the rec trail, we walk by all these people. I always like to say hi to people. And it's the same thing with anybody out there. The more that we're practicing that golden rule of treat others the way you want to be treated, and sometimes just say hi to people, just smile at somebody and kind of pull them out of that, I've walked by 100 people, I'm not saying anything to somebody, just go, hey, how are you? Hello, wave at them, and they're like, wow, that's kind of a nice thing that somebody's recognizing me. So it's just that little thing of when you see a police officer. Yeah. And I'll tell you that when I came to Monterey, it was somewhat different than coming from the big city in that we get a lot of that here. We get a lot of people saying thank you.
Oh,
but that means so much to police officers if you're somewhere getting a coffee and you say, hey, thank you. Just like anything that we're doing, if we thank somebody for something they're doing, that's what I would say would be the biggest thing.
That's great.
Recruiting.
Everyone can do it.
Yeah.
Everyone can do
Anybody
that.
can do it. It's an easy thing to do.
Yeah,
sure.
Everyone can do it.
I would say we're looking for cops, and we'd love to have people that want to come work for us. On other issues to help me more, a pragmatic issue, a lot of times we will get calls about things that happened yesterday, or I saw this last week, or, a lot of social media things. Hey, I saw this happened, like on Nextdoor or those things. And they don't call us. Yeah. And so it's difficult for me to help with things that we don't get called on. Now, quite frankly, a lot of times when we ask people, why didn't you call? Well, I didn't think it was important enough to bother the police with, which I appreciate. Yeah. But if you see things or there are things, and sometimes maybe people will say, well, I've called the police and they didn't come immediately. Yeah. It's good for us to know about those things so that if there's something that you're seeing that is creating concern for you, call our non-emergency line or call 911 if you can't get through on the non-emergency line, so that at least we're aware. Yeah. And sometimes we can't come to things immediately. We have 3 beats in the city of Monterey. Each one of those beats has a police officer 24 hours a day on it. Okay. And then on days and swings, which is till about 2 in the morning, from about 7 in the morning till 2 in the morning, we have a rover. So that creates a 4th police officer. And sometimes if we're lucky, there might be a 2nd rover, but usually that doesn't happen. So we could have 5 officers and then a supervisor. Okay. But just like at the emergency room that you go to up at Chomp, what happens is everything is triaged. Yeah, I got to triage it. Yeah. So if we have a call that is not a high priority and our officers are on an accident or on a domestic violence incident, there's going to be 2 or 3 of them at that incident. If we arrest somebody, which is a whole other topic, if we arrest somebody and have to take them to county jail, we're looking at taking that officer out of service for at least 6 hours. Yeah. The normal booking time is 4 hours, and you figure hour plus or minus to get back and forth. So now you've reduced the staffing by that. So if there's an issue that is not a priority, I don't want people not to call about that. Right. It's important that they call. They see somebody, hey, somebody's making me feel uncomfortable because I live on this street. I've never seen this person before. And they keep walking back and forth looking at this house. And I know that my neighbor's not home right now. That's really important for us. Exactly right. Yeah. And maybe they see a license plate. Well, I want them to call those kinds of things in. Yeah. But if 2 officers are in jail and that leaves me 2 officers in the city and they're on an accident, they're not going to immediately be able to go to this suspicious thing. So all of those things kind of come to play. So I would say that would be the 3rd thing for folks to do is let us know if there's things that are concerning you. Yeah. And really, I mean, those are just some basic things that I think could help us.
Speaking of let us know, I saw this crazy report on Nextdoor, came on Nextdoor. I don't know if you heard about this, but it was about a month ago. They had a shelter in place in Salinas. We live over in Salinas. And we had a shelter in place at like 2 in the morning. The reason why was because there was a mountain lion walking down South Main Street in Salinas. Wow. Yeah. So I was thinking about that. I was like, so Chief, what's the craziest thing you've had happen on your watch in Monterey? The craziest thing. I hope not, but I heard there was a mountain lion like in Delray Oaks over here. So, what's the craziest thing you've had going on? I thought, wow, that's not something you have, that you want to happen. But I was also worried about anybody that's out on the street. Sure. Imagine the guy out there cleaning the street. Sure.
And I mean, that is an interesting aspect because we're having to deal with that, right? And we want to make sure that the mountain lion is not hurting us or really important to me, my dogs, or whatever.
Snatching the kitties and the dogs out of the backyard. Yeah.
Wow. You say in Monterey, and obviously after doing this for a long, there's a lot of things that I have experienced, but craziest things. I'll tell you, I like to tell kind of a funny story, and this is a story that we entertain.
Don't we, guys? We love funny stories.
We like to entertain the kids, at Christmas time with this story, and it's PG, so we can tell our church family this crazy story. Yeah. It's just a cop story that I like to share where, a lot of times police officers, we hope this isn't true, but a lot of us, we get our training about what police officers do from movies and TV.
Okay.
And so I'm human. Yeah. That's where I thought, this is what happens on TV. This is real life. So one of the craziest or kind of funniest things that happened was when I was in San Jose, there was a stolen vehicle report that I'd taken. And I see the stolen vehicle in front of me after all this other. There was a train arm that was down, got stuck in traffic, all these different things. My partner's with me that was in a different car, but he jumps in my car because we see this stolen vehicle. And so the pursuit is on. And so we start chasing this guy, and it was in downtown San Jose, and I went to San Jose State, so I knew exactly where we are.
Yeah.
And so we're chasing this car, and what happens is he crashes, but we see him jump out, and he runs to San Jose State, where they have construction going on, and there's about a 10-foot high fence, and he shimmies this thing, goes over, and keeps running. And I'm thinking, there's no way I'm going to get over that 10-foot fence and catch him if I don't do something. Yeah. So, and I'm not saying this is a story that our police officers should do today. This was like 1989.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
So what happens is, and I actually got in trouble for this, I see the fence, but I can see there's a gate where he went over, and there's chains around the gate. And so on my thought, because this is what happens in the movies, if I run my police car into the gate, it will break the gate open and it'll fly open like in the movies, and me and my partner can then catch the guy.
Yeah.
Well, of course, what happens is, so I drive the car into the gate, waiting for the thing to bounce open. Well, what happens is instead of the gate bouncing open, it turned it like into a snow plow. And so now my car goes forward, and I pulled out the fencing and the gates now are over the front of my police car. And we're kind of stuck in the car because now we can't open the doors. But there's an old saying in policing that nobody's faster than the radio. And so now instead of us being able to come and get the guy, because then the guy was in great shape, he jumps over the next 10-foot fence and he goes into San Jose. But I didn't catch him because I'm stuck in my car. Other officers are able to catch him. But that's a crazy, funny police story. Just understand, and I'm not telling my cops they probably I got in trouble for doing this. What were you thinking running into the fence? But just so everybody knows, a gate will not pop open. In the movies, it's set up.
Don't believe everything you watch.
Don't believe everything you see.
Yeah. Well, Chief, as we wind down our time, I always like to ask a couple of questions at the end to really just kind of give you a chance to kind of pause and then just really reflect, but also really give us an idea of kind of what's going on in your life, but what's going on in your mind. So number one, what gets you up in the morning? Like what motivates you to get up in the morning and get out and face another day?
Well, honestly, and you told me to be honest, I hate getting up in the morning. I am not a morning person. However,
here, Thomas, right? Here. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I hate getting, and I always have been. In police work, you can work a swing shift, and I loved working swing shift because I didn't have to be at work till 3 o'clock.
Oh, wow.
And I like staying up later.
Wow.
But my wife, we have, for the last couple we did it for about 2 years before COVID, and then COVID happened, and now we're back into it. We get up 3 days a week, and we go work out. We get up at 5:30 and go work out with a group of about 6 other people, and I love getting up to be with I hate getting up, but that gets me going for the rest of my day. So like this morning, we got up at 5:30. I hated it. I rolled out of bed, feed the dogs, take my protein shake, go work out for an hour, grumpy there, and then I'm good and happy.
You're good.
I don't know that I'm happy. My folks might say I might not be totally happy, but it gets me in this positive space to come to work and conquer the world and do all the things that we got to do. And it just really makes the rest of the day really positive because I am a task-oriented person that likes to get things done.
Yeah.
And sometimes get frustrated because I have all these plans for what we're going to do during the day. And by the end of the day, while I'm a police officer, not a firefighter, all these fires come up that we got to deal with. And so I'm dealing with putting those out. I get to the end of the day in my task list, I've gotten nothing done.
Yeah.
But if I got that workout in, it's like, well, I got that done.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
two things I would say. The kind of funny part is I hate getting up, but I love getting up for that workout.
Yeah.
But really what gets me up is I love accomplishing things.
Okay.
And in my role that I have now, part of leadership is I believe that really it's a gift and it's only for a short period of time.
Yeah.
And those who are like me that are lucky enough to get a role like this, no matter what it is that we're doing in a leadership role, but if we're leading an organization of any kind, it's a gift that we're given for a short period of time and we got to give it back.
Yeah.
And so I really, I like I said, I've been doing this 37 years. I'm obviously getting toward the end of what I'm going to do. I tease my folks that you're never getting rid of me. I'm going to die at my desk. I love my job.
Yeah.
But I really it gets me up in the morning knowing that this is only for a short period of time. And then I'm going to have to give it back. And hopefully I've developed folks that, if it's tomorrow, they can hit the road running, and they really don't have to adapt. And that I think is a leadership aspect too. But I love getting up because I know that there's going to be a time that I don't have this honor of sitting in this position to be able to do, I think, a lot of the positive things that God has allowed me to do in this point in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. It's a gift and it's only for a short time.
Right.
And whether it's serving in ministry, in my case, or serving as a police officer, law enforcement, whatever that is, it's a gift, and we have to give it back. And our prayer is always that we give it back better.
A little bit better than we got.
A little bit better than, that was a good rule. My mom always said, always leave a room cleaner when you came. She says, make sure it's cleaner than when you got there. So, but the other side of that the question I always like to ask, Chief, is what keeps you up at night? What maybe concerns you that kind of weighs heavy as you think about both as a chief of Monterey Police, but also as a husband, as a dad, as a American citizen. What keeps you up at night?
Yeah. Wow, that was a lot of stuff. I mean, there's a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
I think I'll start with what keeps me up at night. The biggest thing is I'm always really, really concerned that one of the officers that I have the privilege of working with is going to be seriously injured. That really concerns me. And I know that in our profession, I mean, you just look around, that bad things happen to cops. And that is the number one thing that I'm concerned about is something happening to one of our police officers. So really that is the biggest thing. I'll tell you that I love to look at what other leaders, especially in policing, are doing. And I have a good friend who was the chief of the San Jose Police Department, and then he was the chief of the Dallas Police Department. And he just announced his retirement to go be a deputy city manager in adjacent city. And I was reading, they asked him that question, why are you transitioning from being a police chief to a deputy city manager? He said, I love this job, and a big part of that is because I love the cops. But the hardest things for me are just that, worrying about something happening to one of them, but also the aspects of being in the chief's chair and having to discipline or potentially fire police officers, because police officers are really good people that want to serve and do the right thing. And sometimes they make mistakes and don't do the right thing. And we have to check that and discipline that.
Yeah.
And that is certainly not something that we like to do. Now, let me just throw this caveat in there. There's a difference between good police officers and criminals who are wearing a badge that call themselves police officers, who really are not. They're criminals wearing badges. They never should have been cops. They've broken the law, and they should not be in policing. I'm not talking about those people.
Right. Yeah.
Those folks I have no issue with. But there are people in policing who sometimes under different circumstances don't make the best decisions, and we have to take action on that. So that creates a lot of stress for me too, because I mean, it's just little things where officers have done things that they need to be trained on, or it wasn't the best way to do things, or they violate some of our policies and procedures. And so that is something that I do not like doing. And so that keeps me up at night when I'm thinking through how are we going to deal with these two issues. You hit on a whole lot of other issues there. You know, as a father, obviously any parent is, you know, I like to say, you know, from the time that we conceive children till the time that hopefully we die, we worry about that person that we are bringing into this world. And even if they're super successful, life creates a lot of hardship and challenges that everybody goes through, including our kids. And so I always worry about just little things, you know, hey, how are the kids going to deal with this or that? And they're adults doing their adulting thing, but that always creates issues. And I don't have grandkids yet, but I'm sure that offers a whole other level of concern, right? How are they going to
that's another one of God's
navigate
great gifts,
through
grandkids when they come
through life? But I mean, really, I think that's what a lot of religion, no matter what the religion is, offers folks is a more positive way to look at life, in that, you know, we get stuck in this negativity about what's going on with us right now. But if you have some sort of belief that there's something bigger than just me right here, that really, I think, helps us navigate through the challenges that we have, be they small or huge, you know, going through life's issues with losing people that we love, or divorce, or financial issues, or trauma, whatever that is. Having some sort of belief really helps, I think, people get through. So another long-winded answer to your question, but there's a lot of stuff that is concerning going on in the world right now. And I like to leave on a high note. So I think that I'll just kind of leave it there with those are some of the things that concern me.
Well, Chief, you've been so gracious with your time, and just loved getting to meet you and know you. And now today, getting to have a little conversation here on Shoreline Leadership Matters, our podcast. Thank you for being here, and thank you for really blessing us with really a lifetime of leadership. And a special thanks for your service to our country, your service to our community. And just thank you for all you do for those of us that live here in Monterey County, but also for what you do for the broader United States of America. And as you and your fellow law enforcement officers do so much to serve and protect and to really bless our local communities, thank you for what you do. God bless you and your family, and thank you again for joining us today. And so, Shoreline, we just thank you again for our audience for joining us, and we hope that you'll tune in for our next podcast. Have a great day, and God bless you, and have a great week.